Hello, it's Mr. Turk. This next project is sort of not really surface oriented, but it's still included in this because you do a lot with just sort of process, and surface is a part of process, and you sort of abuse paint, and it becomes less about what you're painting and more about how you paint it, and that becomes the subject of the painting. So process painting, all process painters, for the most part, it's how paint is applied. What did you do to the actual physical object of the paint? Not did you paint a house or a sun. That's not important. There's not really a subject other than how the paint is applied, and that's kind of why I included in the surface unit, because how you make your canvas says a lot about the kind of painting you're going to make. I think I note towards the middle down here for this, the surface needs to be cardboard. The reason for this is because this project is more than likely just going to be an experiment, probably not your favorite painting or one that's going to turn out real well. I'm going to force you to use all 5 main categories that I sort of categorize process painting into, and they all involve sort of just simple processes, masking, gestural strokes, splatter, pouring, dripping, impasto. Those are all pretty straightforward, easy things for you to do. They just probably more than likely are things you haven't done yet, so you're not really gonna get good at them with your first painting. And even if this isn't the first time you've done some of this stuff, there's a lot of history behind this kind of painting, and it's just it takes an awful lot of practice to produce work that really stands the test of time when it comes to this style of painting. So with that out of the way, and I will get more into the history and kind of what I want you to think about here. With that out of the way, you should not make a mess of things. Don't get paint on me. Don't get paint on other students. Please use the designated areas for controlled accidents. Make sure you clean up mess areas at the classroom. If you leave something out and I can tell that you used it, or I see you leave it out, I will ask you to clean it up, and please clean it up. Just be responsible for your stuff. This is an extremely messy project, and I really don't want just dozens of cups and all this crap just sitting around. I really want you to clean it up. It's not fair to you. It's not fair to the other classmates in the class. It's also not fair to the other classes that have to use the same facilities as you guys. You're not that special. Please clean up your work area. And I also make mention of this earlier in the criteria, but when it comes to how much paint you can use, do not waste your paint. You should not be using enough paint to cover your entire canvas twice over. You should have a sense of how much paint goes how far by now. Like, you should realize that, if I have a quarter-size dot of paint, that's going to fill a 5 by 5 inch section or something like that. Please don't pour out 8 gallons of paint and then just throw it away because you didn't want to use it, or add some kind of additive to it like sand or plaster and then not use it. If you mix up a paint with an additive, if you water it down, if you prep it, make sure you use it. If you have a little bit left, I can understand. Obviously, you can't use that. Or if you scrape the jar as clean as you can get it, and you just feel like, well, if I even add this last little bit, obviously, when you get to the bottom of the barrel or the last little bit of whatever you made, that's fine. You can throw that away. But try to use most of it. Don't waste supplies. For this project, you're going to get free reign of all of the equipment in number 26. Shelf number 26 is under the sinks. A lot of the additive materials are down there. The Dixie cups for mixing things are down there. There's also squirt bottles. There's also masking tape down there, and then the additives like joint compound and plaster and sand. You can also use the splatter boxes, which I believe I keep in my office or my closet. Can't remember where they are now, but you can use those to splatter if you want. The image on the right is actually a view of Francis Bacon's students. Francis Bacon was a contemporary, now since deceased, but a postmodernist, modernist painter, figurative painter. Really cool guy. His studio was an absolute mess, but it was like a controlled chaos mess. He kind of let it become that, and then he sort of worked in it despite that. And his studio was extremely small, but it was also his studio. Please make sure you clean it up. You're not allowed to just sort of leave a mess out and call it, oh, it's my process, it's my studio, it's my space. It's not your space, it's a shared space. So make sure whatever you get out of 26, whatever this equipment is, that you put it away, because I don't want my design kids finding a spray bottle lying around. Chances are they're probably going to start squirting each other and making a mess of things. So yeah, again, please clean up your stuff. Here are the main process techniques. I'm going to walk you through them. Just sort of keep them in your head. You must use all 5 of these techniques in some capacity on your painting. It doesn't matter what order, but try to think ahead. Try to think as you look through some of these sections, like, how am I going to use this? What will I use? What colors am I going to use with this? What am I going to do? What process? So yeah. Masking is the first technique. I don't know Bridget Riley masker paintings, but masking just means you use masking tape to achieve hard edges. Now, when we did the paint handling assignment, some of you did probably use masking tape to make your hard edge abstract painting. If you didn't, now's your chance to finally use this. And for those of you who did use this for your hard edge abstract, now you can use it in different capacities with different results. You can be messy. You can be an absolute slob and mask out a small area, or you can paint over it with joint compound or impasto techniques to see what you get. There is no real limit to what you can mask off. So just take a look at a couple of these artists and how they use masking to create their work. Gestural strokes are strokes that are made with little to no intent. Joan Mitchell was an artist around that kind of started around the other abstract expressionists like Pollock and them, and she was very famous for these paintings of hers that just have these just brilliantly fast and violent almost strokes in them. So any kind of just random messy, like axe murdery, I kind of call them, strokes count as gestural strokes, and just sort of have fun really racing your brush across the canvas and pushing paint around and just making a mess of things. That's kind of what this style sort of is, and it makes some really interesting results. Like you can kind of see here how the brush is skipping across the canvas. Right here it's getting real dry. Here it's caking on a lot of paint, and it's all just kind of full and fun and random. So that's kind of what I'm expecting when I expect this technique. Splatter's pretty straightforward. You should be pretty familiar with it. Jackson Pollock is kind of the father of this whole idea that processes could be the sole subject of a painting. So he's kind of the genesis of this project. But as you can see here, he really layers on his splatter. He uses gallons and gallons of paint. You can kind of try this if you want. We have a couple of gallons of some latex paint lying around that you can mess around with, but aside from that, just do a little bit of splatter. See what you can do with it. It's a lot of fun to do this sort of technique with. Make sure you do it in the splatter boxes. There's 2 of them, and they should be somewhere in the classroom during this project. If not, please make sure you get them out of my office or wherever they're kept before you do this. To get the long, stringy kind of splatter, use some kind of latex house paint. I believe I have some lying around, so I'll get that out for you and put it in 26. But that is what makes those big, long, drippy kind of like entrails. To get lots of tiny particles and drips, you really got to water your paint down, and I recommend you try doing that if you want to get those like little tiny dot effects. And then there's a bunch of other gestural ways of doing it that I can show you how to do. Helen Frankenthaler is another famous artist, another famous abstract expressionist, and she actually is very famous for these kind of pour paintings or pouring paintings. She just sort of took cups of paint and poured them on the canvas and moved the canvas around to create these big amorphous blobs. And they're really, really gorgeous, just the way the paint kind of flows and collides and drips and drops in certain ways, and it's just kind of fun to get lost in. To do this, it's really easy. You just get a cup of watered down paint and just sort of dispense it on your canvas in some way. How you pour it is up to you. I don't necessarily care if you have a giant lake of color on there. You can pour it in small bits. You can let it drip down. You can kind of just gently drizzle it on there. But anything where you're not chucking the paint across the canvas like you would with splatter is considered pouring or dripping. And there's about a billion different ways to do it. So take a look at some of these artists to sort of see how they do it. All right, now we're to impasto. Impasto, I think, is Italian for paste. Really, it just refers to any style of painting where the paint is applied extremely thick, just like kind of like cake frosting. Think of it that way. These paintings are by Gerhard Richter, which is one of the highest paid living artists today. These are his just his abstract paintings that he's kind of really known for of late. But Richter is an incredibly deep and incredibly awesome artist. You should really look him up and kind of look at all of his stuff, because he does literally everything. He's sort of famous for just switching styles on the drop of a hat. And these paintings in particular are really cool. His process for them is pretty simple. He just takes this giant plexiglass kind of like sheet or a little bar thing, and he puts paint on it, and then he scrapes that across the canvas. So you can kind of see the scrape marks. They kind of go left to right here. You know, they kind of go like that. And sometimes they'll go both directions, up and down, and then he'll take it and he'll do like one section, or he'll kind of move it around. But he uses a lot of paint, and he really layers it on thick to kind of get the layers and layers of paint. You can try this if you want. You can also just do it you know, like with a palette knife. Your palette knife in your box should be used for this particular technique. You can use a brush, but it kind of doesn't really work all that well. It does different things. And just sort of have fun. It's kind of like sculpting the paint, and you can get some really, really cool effects. So take a look at some of these artists to kind of see what this can do. All right, welcome to the danger zone. This is stuff I'm not going to allow you to do, but it's process painting nonetheless, and it's some really cool stuff, really cool artists. You know, Mr. Shiraga, he does like gesture painting with his feet. You're going to look at Rosemary Fiore. She actually makes her paintings with fireworks that contain pigment in the gunpowder. So her process is incredibly cool, but super dangerous. So please don't ever attempt that. And then the last guy, Shinamato, he's just tossing giant cups of paint onto giant canvases. And, you know, I don't want to see you tossing cups of paint into my cardboard spider boxes, please. But, you know, his stuff's really cool. So take a look at that. These last couple of artists here do kind of abstract spray paint art, and they also do, you know, some of the artists towards the end here do some really cool, just sort of figurative, abstract, semi-representational stuff. But take a look at these guys; they make some really, really cool stuff. I'm not going to allow you to use spray paint in this particular project, but if you want to take yours home and you have some spray paint at home, this would be another thing to try. It's a lot of fun to do, and some of these artists are really, really cool, so take a look at a couple of these. Okay, for the process painting, you get to have a lot of fun just playing around with the paint. Again, this painting is about how the paint is applied, not what you paint. So the subject is the paint itself. If you don't apply it in an interesting way, then that kind of defeats the purpose of the assignment, and it kind of defeats the purpose of the painting. This style of painting is really meant for those of you who really like materials and sort of like playing around and don't like really representing subjects. You just sort of like the way the paint looks on the canvas by itself. You don't need anything else really. For this actual project though, you do need to, no matter who you are and what preferences you have, you do need to use the five main process techniques. And those techniques are masking, gestural strokes, splatter, pouring or dripping, and impasto. So I'm just going to kind of go through some of those for you. First one being masking. I'm going to actually make my example inside this sketchbook here. Of course, you're going to have a choice, but for this project, I do believe I require you to just use cardboard. And actually, the reason for that is because this project is just an absolute kind of like mess. So I don't want you using up our canvas boards on a painting you're probably going to experiment with more than you're actually going to paint on. And chances are you're probably not going to like the way your experiment turns out. So if you use a cheap material, I don't have a problem with it, because if you screw up, who cares? If it's great, great. Tons of artists paint on cardboard, actually. It's a common material. So I'm going to mask, actually, my edges here. And you can mask whatever you want. It doesn't matter how you mask or what you mask. Some kids like to mask out shapes. If you want to mask out like a shape, what you would do is you'd put down a lot of tape, and then you would cut, like, with the box knife or something, you would cut out your shape and then peel up the extra tape so that you have like a shape masked out. I'm just going to do a basic square here. And it doesn't have to be too precise, because I'm just doing an example. Alright? And let's play around here. Let's do a couple little bits of tape here, just to add some variety. Alright? Remember, it's an abstract composition, kinda, so you can play around with how you apply things. I got these thin strips of tape cut out. I cut them out with the box cutter, and I just sort of randomly made some thin strips here to kind of mask out some skinny pieces. Okay. There we go. Awesome. And that's masking, really. Now we're going to paint over it, and I'm going to show you the next technique, which is gestural strokes. Gestural strokes just simply means that you're not really controlling the stroke, you're not really painting precisely, you're just sort of having fun with it and just sort of laying it all out. So gestural strokes would be kind of messy or chaotic. You wouldn't have to control it. Joan Mitchell was one of the examples in there, and she's actually, I would think, the master of this kind of stroke technique here. She's just sort of playful with her strokes, and when she paints, she's sort of after that sort of like kind of loose, random look. Right here, and just get some red in there. Notice I'm not really caring where I put it. Like, I'll put it somewhere, but really I'm after that kind of big, violent stroke right there. And I can make some really cool shapes with it, or I can do like different kind of swirly gestures here and there. Alright, if I want. This painting's all about impulse. If you're not being impulsive and crazy, you're not having enough fun with it. Alright. Now if I want, I can switch colors. and keep going here, but I'm just going to kind of stop at yellow, and then we're going to move on to the next thing. The next thing is splatter. Now, I'm not going to actually do full-on like massive splatter here because I'm working at a table and I don't want to get it anywhere. If you do want to do splatter, splatter should be done in one of the cardboard splatter boxes. If you don't see it, it's in my office, chances are it's in my office or somewhere in the room somewhere. And splatter is really easy to do. You just take paint, water it down, and then sort of kind of toss it on the canvas. The wetter it is, the further it'll go, and the more like splattery it will be. The thicker it is, the stringier it will be. If you use latex paint, you can get those really, really kind of like long entrail, sort of like, I don't know what to call them, like squiggles almost. I'm going to show you kind of a brief way to do it on here with some purple. Just going to water it down. You can actually do this with your brush too. It's a more controlled splatter. And essentially what you do is you pull the bristles back with your fingers and you let it kind of shoot out. The more water I add, the further it'll go. And I'm going to wet this up a little bit here. Also, it helps to have a big brush. This isn't working too great because my brush is tiny. Okay, some splatter right there. I don't know if you can see it, but there's some tiny little bits in there. Got some purple on my finger. You can finger paint if you want a little bit. Alright, so now I've got that on there. And, you know, splatter, pretty straightforward. There's not much to it, really. Sometimes I like to take and just sort of gently tap my brush like that. Yeah, again, don't tomahawk your brush. Don't bring it like way over your shoulder and then back down on the canvas, even if you're doing it in the splatter box, only because chances are it's going to miss the box and go outside of it. Actually, as I look at my table here, I kind of hit my checkbook. Don't know why I left that sitting out. Now it's covered in paint. Let's go on to the next one. The next one is pouring or dripping. Now, of course, because this is in my sketchbook here, I'm not going to do pouring. Pouring essentially would mean you get one of the Dixie cups or another like water jug and you water down the paint and pour it onto your canvas, okay? The advantage of doing this is you can cover a lot of area and then you can kind of pick it up and move it around. I'm just going to do dripping here, so I'm going to add a little bit more purple up here and then add a lot of water to it, okay? The more water I add, the better, and the further it'll go. Okay, and I can either blow on it, or I can pick up my canvas here, which is my sketchbook, and kind of let it drip. And gravity should take it over and kind of do all the rest of the work here. I'm going to blow on this. That's not wet enough. Of course it's not going anywhere. There we go. Okay, so dripping, easy. About as easy as splatter. Again, you want to play around with it. You want to get physical with the paint. I'm not being very extreme here because I'm just sort of sketching in my sketchbook, but you know, you can go crazy if you want, so long as you keep it clean. If you do happen to make a mess, I don't mind, just so long as you clean it up. I really don't care. Just please, please, please clean it up. On to Impasto. Impasto is the last one. And it's by far the easiest on the list. I don't care when you do it. You can do it first if you want. And right here I have a little bit of joint compound. If you don't know where the joint compound, it's in 26, and it's usually in kind of a green lidded plastic bucket. And joint compound, the way it works is it's kind of a cementy mixture. And you can add water to it to make it more liquid, or you can kind of leave it sort of chunky-ish. And what you can do is you can mix it with paint to make it thick. Okay, so I'm actually going to take all of this off my canvas, or my palette right here, and I'm just going to kind of play around with my purple. Alright, you can already see it's sort of breaking up the color here. It's got some color to it. Okay, and if I add like an orange to it, sort of just play with it, you can see how it's getting kind of texture in there. I don't know if you can see it. Okay, So you see how that's kind of nice and thick there? It's got some kind of texture to it. The more I put on, the thicker it'll be, and you know, you can go as thick as you want. Don't be too excessive with it, and just sort of play around with it. Have fun. You can scratch into it. You can layer it on there like frosting. You can, you know, if you want to do the frosting thing, just get like a plastic baggie and cut off the end of it, and you can kind of squirt it out like it's, you know, frosting. You can do pretty much anything with it. There's other additives too. If you want to use like sand, or there's what else? Plaster, another white powder. I can't remember what it is. All right. So we got that all done. I can pull up my masking if I want and keep painting. I'm not going to keep painting, but that's essentially the 5 main techniques you have to use for this project. In what order, I don't care. I did masking first, and then I kind of left some white here. It's usually smarter to paint something first and then mask over it. But play around with all 5 of them. Make sure you have all 5. I can tell if you have all 5. And just sort of make a mess. This is about having fun, and it's about the process of applying the paint. That's the subject of the painting. The fact that this looks like an interesting little bright mess in here is what makes this painting appealing. If you don't do that, then you're kind of missing out on the point.